Welcome to Wisdom Shared, where parents are the experts and connection inspires change. I'm Carol Blue Eyes. I was compelled to create this podcast after meeting a special group of parents from all over the world who were raising children with special needs. I had a hunch that these hidden stories, peppered with uncertainty, hope, resilience, joy, fear, pain, and love, could teach more than just me how to transcend the quick assumptions most of us make about people who are different than ourselves. Actually, these parents had a lot more to teach me than I even imagined. Beril was one of those parents. She was a designer in Italy before moving back to Turkey to raise her family, and sooner than expected gave birth to twins, Emre and Denise. The kids spent the first 5 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit, while Beril, a single mother, traveled back and forth from her home to be with them. And when at 13 months, Emre was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and told by 2 doctors that he would never walk or talk, Beril decided to take matters into her own hands. The one method she intuitively felt would allow Emre to reach his potential was found in another continent. So she packed her bags. And during her training, the unexpected happened.
I went to the training to learn the tools to help my son and other children, but I had no idea how much it would change me as a person.
She didn't stop with helping just her son. She wanted to share what she had learned with other families. Beril opened up a clinic in Istanbul, teaching the Anat Baniel method of NeuroMovement. Beril is one of the most determined, passionate, honest, and articulate women I have ever met. She describes how she guided Emre's teachers to give her son agency. She insisted that Emre learn to stand up for himself when bullied, to follow his passions and believe in himself. He recently earned his brown belt in judo, and Beril wrote a book, soon to be published in the United States, called I Am Free Now. Let's listen to Beril's wisdom.
English is not my first language, so every now and then I might get lost for words.
With accents, I love it. It's kind of nice for you to make the mistakes because it tells us you're not American, which means you have something much more interesting to say than us Americans.
Okay.
Perfect. No worries. Let's get started. Tell me a little bit about where you live and about your family. Like who do you live with?
So I live in Istanbul, the biggest city in Turkey. I'm a single mom living with my 2 kids. I have twins. They're 9-year-old, a boy and a girl. My daughter's name is Denise, and my son is Emre. And Emre has special needs. He has a diagnosis of PVL, periventricular locomalacia, and cerebral palsy.
And so you had two babies, obviously born at the same time. And tell me a little bit about how that played out for you. It must have been very traumatic.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all my life I wanted to have kids. I love kids. I love being around kids. I was looking forward to having my own kids. So I was over the moon when I found out that I was pregnant. At that time, my husband at the time was doing his military service in Turkey. And it is compulsory. Every male has to do it. And because prior to that, we were living in Italy, he had to do his later. So during my pregnancy, he was away and I was alone. And around 29 weeks, I suddenly had to go to the hospital and thinking something is wrong, but did not imagine that that day would be the day of my delivery. So obviously I was shocked. I was, traumatized and not knowing what was going to happen, if they would live, if they would survive. You have all these dreams about what's next in your life, and suddenly it's all washed away and you're left with a big unknown. So that was hard to tackle emotionally, because I had to be strong and be there for them. So while my husband was away, so those 5 weeks basically were the hardest days of my entire life, leaving them at the hospital every night, coming home, not knowing if I would see them again the next morning. It was tough. It was rough. And, obviously my body was going through, postpartum changes, which I had no luxury on focusing on. So I was just completely into being with my kids and giving them love and hope as much as I could while I was with them.
And how long did you stay in the hospital?
Only one night.
Is that normal in Turkey?
It's not, no, it's not normal, but I was trying to be very strong for them. I wanted to see that. I didn't imagine they would discharge me because I looked so okay. I just wanted to be up and be with my kids in the NICU. And once the doctors saw me up and walking, they said, you can go home now. And I'm like, I don't want to go home. I want to be with them the entire time. Of course, that wasn't allowed. So I went home the next day and then did a lot of back and forth every day, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. I would wake up 3 or 4 in the morning and I would call the nurses in the NICU asking them how their kids were doing. And so, yeah, it wasn't easy.
Now, I'm speaking from experience. I had a C-section of 1. And there's just no way. I remember I had no idea I was going to experience so much pain just moving. So how is it that you didn't have that? I mean, or did you when you were adrenaline was rushing, you think? What?
Exactly. But I just numbed myself, Carol. It was just like, I don't know what I went through in those days. I don't know. I numbed my brain to it all. I just wanted to be, strong for them. And of course, it was like there was a lot of discomfort, but I didn't want to listen to my own self and my own body. So
the power of the brain, right? And the motherly instinct.
Exactly.
So strong. So tell me, how old were they when they were discharged?
They were 34 weeks. So we stayed there for 5 weeks in total.
Did they have therapy in the hospital? How does it work in Turkey?
No. Unfortunately not. I mean, that's one of my biggest regrets, that I didn't know more at the time, because a couple of days after they were born, the neurologist came in, they had brain scan and everything seemed fine. But after 5 weeks, and having premature babies, they should have had another scan before they discharged us. Now I know that. At the time I did not, so I did not question anything. By the time they discharged us, I thought everything we left behind and it was going to be all, rainbows from that day onwards. Nothing was wrong. They were healthy. I could take them home, like just be a normal family. He was diagnosed at 13 months old. During that year span, I knew that I could see that he was delayed, because, you're not supposed to compare kids to other kids. But I could see my daughter having, gaining new skills, doing new stuff every day. And he still couldn't hold his head up. He couldn't sit. He couldn't, it was very different. And the gap was getting larger and larger every day. But our doctors kept telling me every time I raised this question, she would tell us that, they were born prematurely, so we should wait a little more. He could be progressing a little slower, but there's nothing wrong with him. Let's wait until 13 months old. When she said, now you've crossed the red line and you should go and see a neurologist. We went to see the neurologist, and then the neurologist was angry with me, saying, why didn't you come here before? So that's when he had his diagnosis, and that's I call the second, tsunami, because you're thinking everything is okay. You leave those worried and difficult time back in the hospital. You have a year ahead of you. There's that motherly instinct saying something is wrong, but still you're hoping it's all fine because the doctor's saying it's all fine, and then you have the second round of trauma.
And so how does it work in Turkey in the United States? As you know, they have what's called early intervention. Is there something similar to that, or how does it work?
Unfortunately not. I mean, the support that the state gives is very minimal. So basically you have to fetch for everything on your own as a parent if you want to do anything outside or more for your child privately. Does that make sense?
Yes, completely. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So there was no early intervention. Basically, the neurologist told us to go see a PT, and that's when we started with physical therapy. Well, first it was first it was occupational therapy and play therapy, and then once we had the report and the diagnosis, and so that's when they said you should also see a PT, and our new life began.
Mm. And did you have to go to a clinic, or did they come to you?
No. We go to a clinic.
So you were bringing both your kids?
At the time, no, only my son, because my daughter was, she was never referred to see a neurologist. So we didn't think she needed any kind of therapy until we started with the Anat Baniel method.
Oh, that's interesting. So we'll come back to that. Tell me a little bit about the physical therapy, because I want to then ask you about the ABM method and how they're different and why you switched over. Yeah, and I just want to hear about, different culture, different way to do rehab. Tell me a little bit more about how that worked for Emre.
Our physical therapy adventure lasted very briefly, I have to say, only a couple of months, because basically as a mom, I saw how much he was suffering during the sessions. And seeing him like that and not interested in what he was asked to do, basically because he couldn't do it. It was traumatizing for him as much as it was for me. He was crying, I was crying during the sessions. And I remember I was thinking to myself, like, this is going to be a part of our life. It has to be a part of our life. And what good can come out from this if this is what it's called, PT? And I don't want to talk bad about physical therapy per se. I think it's very useful. It's just the place we started. Now that I have more experience and I've seen and worked with many different physical therapists, it was just that one location where we started was a very negative experience for us as a family. But now that I look back, maybe it also helped me find ABM through that experience. So I think, there was a good in that.
That's a great way to look at it. So just before we leave that, can you give some examples of what they were doing in physical therapy? And, obviously there's different therapists would do different things, but in your experience, in your case, for that one therapist at that time in history, what was she choosing to do?
Well, there's this very clear image in my head that I cannot wipe out. The two therapists had placed him on a roller as if he was sitting on a horse, right? So there's this roller rocking him from side to side, and there's these two buckets on each side of him, and he was asked to pick up a toy, bring it to the other side, and drop it in the other bucket. And he could not hold his head up at that time. So his spine was not organized, his pelvis was not, there was no way for him to carry his head over his spine and the pelvis. Yet he was asked to turn from one side, pick up a toy, some weight, take it to the other side, and he just couldn't do it. And he was crying, and I was crying, and I was like, no, this cannot be it. It's like there should be a more humane way to connect with him and see where he's at and ask him to, or help him to get to the next step, not go like 50 steps ahead. It was just like, I had no idea what it could be, but I knew there should be a way. So that's when I started doing my research.
He was 14 months, you said?
Yeah, around that time he was 14, 15 months.
And what was he able to do? What were his abilities?
He could roll from one side to the other. He couldn't sit, he couldn't crawl, he couldn't come up to all fours. No.
So they skipped right over to putting him in a sitting position.
Yeah, because in their mind, a baby of a certain age should be able to have certain skills. So they're just trying to rush him to do that when his brain has no idea where he is in space.
So what happened after you were, once again, it sounds like you were traumatized. Where did you go from there?
I went on Google. I went on Google. I went on the internet. I felt wasn't going to be able to find answers within Turkey. So I went on to international forums, parent blogs, parent forums to see, to search for what else is out there and to help, my son. So I went on a Canadian forum, and there were all these different types of modalities, methods mentioned, what works for a certain child, what works for another child. And there was this abbreviation, ABM. And I'm like, what is this ABM? So I remember putting it in Google, ABM, cerebral palsy, let's see what's going to come out from this. And there it was, the Anat Baniel method. So I went onto her website, and, the more I read, the more I wanted to read. And one of the moms in the forum had said that Anat's book, Kids Beyond Limits, has just been published. So, and I should read it. So that's when I ordered the book from the States. It arrived. I just read it, and I read it again. And I think I read it 3 times over and over. And I said, we've got to do this. This is it. It just it clicked with my understanding of him. I had no idea about neuroplasticity at the time. I had no idea about how much movement has influence on the brain's potential to learn and change. But it's just the way she connected with the children, story over story. I was inspired, and I was like, I know this is going to help him. We should try it.
And then what did you do?
So then, of course, I wrote to Delete at the center. I said, this is our story, and I'm looking forward to coming to the center. But Anat was fully booked. I wanted Anat to see my son. So, she said Anat can see him in the next round, which would be in 4 months' time. And for me, waiting for 4 months would be losing 4 years of progress at that age. So I said, if I can't go to San Francisco, then I have to find someone else, some other practitioner, an experienced practitioner to work with my son. And I had friends in Toronto, and I was communicating with them at the time. And they said, come here, we'll find someone here. And so I started researching for practitioners in Canada. And I found Judith Dack in Toronto, and my friends were living in Toronto. So I said, perfect. So I started corresponding with Judith, and luckily she gave she had a place for us in a month's time. He would be 16 months at that time, and that was enough time for us to get passports and visas and all that procedure, and we were off to Canada. I had scheduled for us to go for 3 weeks, and I had scheduled also for my daughter Denise to have lessons, because I was reading that it's not therapy, it's not being done for a particular reason, but it was just to improve the learning potential of the brain, and it could be useful for her too, so why not? So I scheduled lessons for both of them, and he made progress every single day, that I ended up extending our stay for 2.5 months. I wasn't ready to go back. I couldn't go back. There was nothing equivalent to what I was seeing during the lessons and after the lessons. I was scared of going back to Turkey. What would happen next? So I extended week by week, week after week. We extended our stay and ended up being there for 2.5 months.
Wow. And I didn't ask you this. In physical therapy, what was the prescription? Like how many times a week or how many times a day was it for physical therapy? And then how was it organized with Judy with ABM?
Well, basically, the neurologist who diagnosed Emre said that he will never be able to walk and possibly not talk, looking at the injury. And she said, go twice a week and hope for the best. Basically, that's the prescription we got. And of course, with Judith, it was, in ABM, we do intensive. So it's 10 lessons per week. We would basically go in the morning, have a lesson, then go back home, feed them, nap, and then in the afternoon, when they're awake, go back again.
What about other medical interventions? How does it work? You had your neurologist, you had your general doctor for a little while, you had a physical therapist. You have ABM. Are there any other medical people in your life that help manage?
Emre had SPML surgery by Dr. Roy Nuzo twice. And SPML really helped him with his mobility too.
What kind of doctor is he?
Podiatrist who has recently, unfortunately, retired, but he has been following Emre since he was 3. And we get his braces there because there is unfortunately nothing even similar to in quality of the braces, but also the time Dr. Jordan spends with the child and the parent and understanding and analyzing the movements of the child and how he determines what kind of assistance he needs to take into the next step is unique, basically. Once Dr. Jordan told me that he basically tried himself every single brace that he has designed on himself before issuing to the kids. And he worked with PTs, physical therapists, while he was with the braces, without the braces, to feel the difference in his own body. So there was that kinesthetic empathy he has with the child, with the support. I mean, I trust both doctors so much. These 2 doctors really do the best they can with the minimal intervention they can to help the child go beyond their limitations.
An insurance program for physical therapy in Turkey, or how does it work for medical care?
It comes down to, 2 hours a week, which is not enough. So a lot of families have to pay out of their pocket. So it's a lot of financial burden on the families. And also in our culture, the big family is a lot of support. So relatives and financially, but also like taking care of the kids. And you're never alone, really. We're very fortunate in that sense. There's this always, the aunts and uncles and grandparents.
Who is your support network?
If you're asking about my having emotional support, which I think is the main question there. So I went through phases. I was feeling very alone and isolated initially. I felt like no one really, I had this big support, my family, my friends around, but no one really got what I was going through. And so I built these big walls around me, and I just wanted to be inside with the 2 kids, and I just didn't want to have anything to do with the outside world. Which at that point I thought I need someone to guide me through this because this is not healthy. I started to see a psychologist. And one of the things that she told me, because whenever I was talking about the kids and not about myself. And something she said really struck me. She said, your kids were born to this situation. And the better he does every day, their situation is going to get better. But your situation, you had your plans and your dreams and, wishes, and all of that evaporated once you gave birth at 29 weeks. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to look inside and seek what works for you and how you can heal yourself. They're fine already. You have to put the oxygen mask to yourself first, which I found out to be very useful advice. And then I moved to the next step, which was by pure coincidence. I ended up in this group doing psychodrama. I don't know if it's the same word in English, psychodrama. It's a group therapy work given by a psychologist, and it's like a family constellation, but you're not doing it through energy level, but it's more how the psychologist works with you in this group setting is you have different members of your family and you have a topic you want to explore. So you choose different characters from the group representing the members of your family. And the way the psychologist takes you through it is you get to see the same situation from the different personalities in your life and how they would talk to each other, how you communicate and you bond with each other. It just wakens you up to new possibilities within those relationships. And that's where, in that group setting, we were eight of us. And that was the first time I said it out loud that I have a child with special needs. And that was the breaking point for me, because before that, of course I have a special needs child, but I couldn't verbalize it. I was too scared to see what would happen if I would say it out loud. But there I just overcame that fear, and I didn't realize I would feel so much lighter after having said it, and having, the whole group dynamic helped me a lot in healing myself. And the third phase was obviously going into the training, the ABM NeuroMovement training. It's, we were a group of, around 100 students, mostly parents with special needs. And it was just wonderful because, you could look into each other's eye and understand each other and feel each other without needing for words. And it was just such a safe place to be, and helped me transform. I went to the training to learn the tools to help my son and other children, but I had no idea how much it would change me as a person. The more you do the work, the more you come to your own self, and having a clear idea of where you stand in your life and where you want to stand, and what is a yes and what is a no. So, it's just like, it was really transformational for me. And I was reading all these quotations in Anat's website and talking to the enrollment manager about, this is going to be so transformational, so wonderful. And it was just like, it sounded so American, I was like, yeah, right. But then once I was there, it truly was transformational. It was the best thing I've ever done for myself, and then I'm able to give it to others. So it's like, it's such a blessing.
If there were three things that just make it so powerful, what are those three things that makes it unique and different from whatever else you've tried?
The sentence that struck me most when I first read Anat's book was, if he could, he would. So, and that ties into, from fixing to connecting. It's you look at the child, and where we started with physical therapy, there's this expectation of where the child should be. And they're trying to rush him into that state. But if he could, he would already. And he can't. So we need to look at from a different perspective and see where the child is, and offer different ways of outlet for him to figure out how to get to the next step, instead of making the child do it. So those were the two concepts that really struck me when I started understanding the method more and more.
The three that just makes you feel like it makes this stand as apart from anything else you've tried or heard about.
I would say definitely one of the essentials, the slow. It was so contradictory to where we were when we started, especially having a child who's delayed, and reading about slow and looking at the child and, listening to the experts saying, by this age, he should be doing this, and by this age, he should be doing that. And then you're reading about slow and the importance of slow. But the more I slowed down to help him slow down, and created this space where I started noticing more and more that I was giving him opportunity and time for him to figure out how to move and how to think and how to say a sound. So he had an intention, which then he could turn it into an action, whatever it was. But if I didn't slow down and give him that space for him to discover and feel and sense and all of that, he would maybe not get there. So it was just those amplified moments, making these micro moments into these macro learning opportunities. It was fascinating. And the more I did it, the more I saw that he started having a say in and taking agency in what he was doing. And that, I think, created the foundation of where he is now, which is very, he's a child with confidence and determination and motivations, because he figured things out for himself.
Wow. So yeah, that's a whole different way of looking at it. And it sounds like it really puts the parent in there as much as the child. How you are as a person and how you think and feel is as important.
For sure.
So like you said, it's that connection. Now, I am also trained in ABM, so I'm very familiar with the concepts, but I don't have a child with special needs myself. And I think that learning about these things from the outside in as opposed to, for you, the inside out is very
Mm-hmm.
different. So that's why I ask you to explain, because I could never explain it the way you just did. I mean, it just is much more powerful for you to explain.
Yeah, also because I thought, we're having these intensives. So it corresponds to what, 10 hours a month, maybe. And the rest of the time, he's at home, or he's with me. So I have to find a way to make it as useful as possible for him to integrate what he's learned during the lesson and maybe to go a step further. So I really had to change my way of thinking and being with him and applying the essentials one at a time, maybe, because initially it was overwhelming to think about all of them at the same time. But the more I did it, the more I could step back and I could let him come forward. It was such a dance between us. And I found it really, I had studied design and I thought, design is the most creative thing, but just being with the child and dancing with their brain is the most creative thing ever, I think. So, and that's again, one of the reasons also that I decided to write the book. It was basically my healing process writing about it, but also writing about the process to help other parents, maybe give them opportunity to shift their thinking and to actually take joy of being with their child and having also more say in how they are with their child.
And what's the name of your book?
Well, translated, it is called I Am Free Now in English. It's something Emre said. Once a year, I try to take him to Anat in San Rafael, to her center. And the last time we were there, we went with his walker and she worked with him. And then we went to Target because I had to buy a few things. And I am with the shopping cart and he's pushing his walker. And he, at one point, said to me, you can look in this aisle. I'm just going to go for a walk. And he left his walker and started taking steps. I mean, he would take steps at the time in the house, but never outside, never in a place that he didn't know, it was foreign to him. And, there's all these shelves and stuff around. So it could be, not safe either. But he did that. And from that day onward, every day we would go to Barnes and Nobles, is our most popular place to go. So he would play hide and seek with me there, or say, I'm going to the kids section, you go to your section, and we'll meet at the cashier. And one day when he was walking away from me, because every day he was getting faster and there was more fluidity in his walk, and he just opened up his arms and he said, I am free now. And there's this just joy in how he was saying, like, you don't have to be with me, because up until that time, I was always, walking by his side, making sure, because he would fall every now and then. And if it was, I would usually let him fall, but if it was too dangerous, then I would be there to catch him. So, but there was always this, we were as a couple. And now we could go wherever he wanted, in the rhythm he wanted and the pace he wanted. So he was like, I'm free now.
That's beautiful. A lot of families in the United States, at least, parents are sort of on their own and they want to try anything they can. So they try lots of different things.
I always looked to make him move more and more and more. So he loves to swim. At 3 years of age, he wanted to start judo. Now he's a brown belt. He even went to a tournament there. So, like, judo is a big part of his life. He did yoga. He loves playing soccer with his friends. So yeah, he likes to move around a lot, and that's, yeah, sports has been a part of our journey, a big part of our journey, because that's where he likes to challenge himself too. So, and wants to do more and wants to achieve more and be together with his friends and play together with his friends. And I see that as the best therapy, you know.
Yeah. And what's his school like? Is he in a school like with other kids that are neurotypical, or is he in a special school?
Neurotypical kids, yeah, because he doesn't have cognitive delays. So, I mean, I said that because even if in Turkey, since a couple of years, kids with special needs can go to any school, right? But there's a big backlash from the school not accepting the kids with special needs. So there's this big fight against families and school administrations, especially if the child has, you know, cognitive delays or behavioral challenges. It's a big issue. He just loves learning and being there with his peers and playing and learning together. So we've been very, very lucky in that sense.
Are there many instances where you've had to advocate for him?
I mean, you know, you always have to. You know, there are situations where I had to do more, but I usually let him do it. So again, like the first day of school, when the principal called me saying that maybe you should come before Emre to school and he should come later so you can explain his friends about his situation. So inform them so they don't ask questions to him. And I said, no, you know, he can talk about himself. I'm not going to talk for him. He knows himself. He knows his challenges. He knows people are going to ask him questions. And even if I do, you know, tell his friends, they're still going to go and ask him. I don't want anything to be not normal. You know, you have your circle time in the morning, probably the first day of school. Everyone is going to speak a little bit about themselves. And Emre will say, you know, I use a walker, I wear braces because, you know, my muscles are not strong enough. And I have a sister and I love sports and I love music, and that'll be it. You know, let's not make it a big deal. And the school has been very understanding with my way of thinking. So they let him do it. And the more he did it, the more, you know, empowered he became too about and to advocate for himself.
Does he encounter any kind of bullying? I mean, he's still kind of young in school.
Yeah, no, he does. He does.
And how does he handle that?
I mean, of course, it's upsetting for him, especially if it comes from people he knows and calls friends. But, you know, it happens and it will happen, and I can't raise him in a bubble. So he has to learn. I mean, it's important for him to speak about it to me, to his friends, and, you know, maybe not at the time of the incident, but sometime later, to talk about his feelings and what hurt him and how and why, to understand the other, you know, the friend's perspective. And that's helped him a lot. Because sometimes, you know, he sees that there's a big misunderstanding, and sometimes he sees it's got nothing to do with him. So, you know, having these opportunities of dialogue helps him, I think, mature in that way. And again, you know, he will have to advocate for himself. I can't be there with him 24/7. So sometimes the sister, if she's there, she would jump in to protect him. And I had to stop her from doing that and just let him do it on his own, because she's very protective of her brother.
Sounds like you use these instances, which can happen obviously to any child, as teaching moments. And then he then matures and gets more ability to express his emotions and deal with negativity from others.
Yeah, of course, it's emotional resilience. You know, we always go through those phases. All of us, I do it all the time. So it's the way you look at life, you know. If it's going to knock you over, or if you're going to, you know, stand up from where you fall off and move on. So right. And not get caught up in all of that drama, you know. It's going to happen. It's part of life. But then you just shake it off and move on.
Yeah.
But it's important, again, to talk about it and not keep it inside. That's my priority. It's to share it and share your feelings and talk about it.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about their relationship with each other, brother and sister. How is that?
They have their moments, but they never call each other by their names. We have a word in Turkish. It's basically translates to like my dear sibling, but it's one word. So there's that affection in it, in the word. So they always, even if they're fighting, they call themselves to each other, my dear sibling. It's fun. They're very close. They're very close. And yet they're different, and they see each other's differences in behavior and in interests, but they do share a lot, and I think it's wonderful for both of them to have each other in their lives.
If you were to give advice to other parents that are maybe just starting off on this journey or feel a little bit stuck, or just advice that you've learned that you think would be helpful for others?
So especially when you start off in this journey, you'll hear a lot of different opinions, opposing opinions from experts and doctors and therapists. And I always, tell my families too, it's the mother's instinct, the gut feeling it's the strongest. So I would trust that, what's going to be best for your child, always. And it never fails. So that would be the first one. Just trust your intuition.
I find that it's a bit of a paradox because I understand that parents know their children the best. On the other hand, you have people that, let's say, like yourself, who are having an ABM session with a parent, and you are making suggestions to the parent to be a little bit different. And many parents might be like, well, who are you to tell me what I should do with my child, if they have the attitude that I know what's best for my child. So there's that sort of paradox in that advice. How can you be open-minded to new ideas about your child if you are the expert on your child?
What I meant was, whatever information you get from the outside, listen to your gut. That will tell you if what you're hearing might be a possibility for you and your child or not. It's when you strict opinion about something, it's very hard to get new feedback and new information. What I'm saying is, be open enough to listen, but then listen to your intuition, and let that be the guide in your decision-making process. Yeah, does that make sense?
Completely. What you just said really clarifies it, that it's not black and white. It's more about that you trust yourself more than anybody else.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that you can't be open to what other people say, but the bottom line is you have to believe in it, and no one's going to tell you what's better.
And also, I also encourage parents, because that's something I've done too, is keep a journal. From first day onward, I had several journals. It's good to write about what the child can do at that time. And then, the feedback you get from different specialists, different experts, therapists, whatever, suggestions for your child. I always took notes about that. And then every now and then you look back and you see from the suggestions you get where the child was and where he is now, and you see the progress, and it either makes sense or it doesn't make sense. Again, no one has the magic wand. I always tell parents, you can try different things. If the child is happy and peaceful and safe while they're doing whatever they're doing, if you're seeing progress with whatever you're doing, obviously it makes sense that you do it. So having that open-mindedness, and also having the journal where you can actually backtrack because it's a roller coaster ride sometimes as a parent, apart from all the experts' opinions, and you always question, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Is there more that I can do? What else can I do? There's always, no matter the age of the child, there are still moments where I debate with myself, even though he's 9 years old, and we've had a lot of experience in these last 9 years. Going through the journal and seeing that it gives you hope again, it brings you to your feet again. You get inspired again, and you believe in whatever you're doing more. So I think it's very useful to have a journal.
That's a great suggestion.
To find your own rhythm and pace and what works for you, you will have to do your own research and not wait for answers to come to you. Knowledge is power. Learn a lot. That will give you foundation to be able to advocate for your child and know what's best for your child. Not everything will be useful for your child, or doing a lot will necessarily make it so that he improves faster or better. But no one has a magic wand. It's a process. It's a long process. And it can be hard. It can be disappointing at times, worrisome. But it is also, joyful and fun and inspiring. And I think the best way to deal with it is to embrace it all, with all the, negative aspects and also the positive aspects, because it's your new life and it's your normal now. So just embrace it all and take care of yourself. I did that later. I wish I had started taking care of myself and helping me heal earlier. Again, the ABM training had a huge impact in me going forward emotionally.
What do you do to take care of yourself?
Now I love taking long walks. I love being a part of new trainings. I'm an assistant in the ABM trainings, but it also gives me a break from everything. I go there for 11, 12 days. It's like my retreat. I met a lot of wonderful parents along the way, and they've become, we've become very close, and we share a lot. So yeah, that would be another advice, actually, to find parents that are going through similar journeys, processes around you, because you need someone to walk this path with.
How do you feel about the label of children with special needs?
That's a chapter in my book. In Turkish, we do have the label children with special needs. I don't like using that. I don't believe in labels, and I don't believe in labeling kids. So extraordinary, unique, special, it just puts them in a different place. And I don't think they should be normal. They are normal. Why do we need an adjective to speak about them? It's just how they are, the progress they're making, the developmental process is different compared to typical developing kids. But you don't need an adjective to label that.
You feel like it makes it like there's something wrong with the kids.
Yeah, not even wrong. It's just putting it outside the normal. Why? This is normal. We're all different. Of course, they have different challenges and needs. And I'm always looking from the child's perspective. It's just, they take themselves out of the common group, and we don't need that. We're trying to get all kids in an inclusive environment. And by labeling them, you're just I feel like you're just pushing them outside of the circle. So I don't think we need words like special or unique or extraordinary. I think each child is unique and special and extraordinary.
The whole idea of process, how do you deal with parents' expectations of some kind of quick fix desire versus the idea that in the long run, or it's going to take a while, it's a process? Have you found that you're successful with helping people see that, or do people see that already? What has been your experience?
People who come to me do know about our process mostly. So Emre is now 9 years old. He started taking his first steps when he was 6. He still has balance issues. He still has his challenges. So it is a process. So families who come to me already know that, and we've been doing ABM for 8 years, and we've seen miracles day after day, but it's a journey. So Anat has that, it too. There is no small change or big change. Change is change. So I always emphasize that to parents. It's being a detective and looking out for those little subtle changes in the child, because the most important thing is that the child can learn. And if they can learn, they can always learn more. So, and the flexible goals is another essential that I always ask the parents to read about in Kids Beyond Limits, because, we all have our dreams and our expectations and our goals, but you have to be also prepared to be flexible in those goals. Otherwise, if you're just like fixated on one thing, you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. And I'm not just talking about, having a child with special needs. It goes out for anything. So it is a long process. I mean, they see it again with my son and our journey, and they know it's not going to change from one day to the other. But once you get the families to start seeing those little changes, they start having more joy in their lives, their family lives, because they learn to celebrate those little changes. And I think that helps them change their perspective in how they be with their kids, and just have more faith in the process and whatever they're doing. So I think that's the most important thing. One of the most important thing as practitioners dealing with families is to teach them to look out for little changes and be detectives in looking out for those little changes.
And do people ask you often, like, how long is this going to take? And what do you say to that kind of question?
What I tell families who just start with ABM is, let's do, 3 rounds of intensives, and then sit down and have a talk. What changes do you see? What changes do I see? And if they want to go forward or not, just to have a more honest dialogue with the parents. Every time I went to see Anat, I would ask her, if he's going to walk or not. And she would just laugh at me and say, I don't know. I'm doing everything I can in my power to help his brain change and lay the foundations for that. But it has to come from him. So, and I always found that answer very honest, because the neurologist who told me that he will never be able to walk was, again, being a fortune teller, and no one knows the power of the brain. So I don't make any promises to families. I always say this is a process. It's a long process, but if there's change, there's potential for more change. So just, be in the process.
Do you have anything you'd like to say? Anything I have not asked you?
Well, I have a center in Istanbul. And up until the start of the pandemic, every month I had either 1 or 2 visiting practitioners that come and work with me with families and kids. So it was an up and running, quite busy center at the time. Now, unfortunately, we can't have visiting practitioners. So it's only me, but I'm hoping these days will be over at some point and, back to the old way.
You're very generous with your time. I
know it was fun. I hope it was useful.
Fantastic. No, great. And you've said so many great things in so many different ways that are really powerful. I mean,
oh, good.
I've met you, of course, but not for long conversations. But people talk about you a lot, just so you know, like in a very positive way.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. No, like you're kind of like famous out there as somebody who's really breaking ground and, doing great work. And yeah.
I just knew this is going to be our, driving engine, this method and the principles. And so I just went for it. I'm working with my son with this method only. So why would I do that to my own child if it's not working,
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Beril writes in her book, I Am Free Now, I designed my graduation thesis in 2003 coincidentally on wabi-sabi, a Japanese philosophy of life that dates back to ancient times. Wabi-sabi is an understanding of being able to see the beauty within the imperfection. Instead of seeing perfection, it is seeing the value of the flaw, knowing it, loving it as it is, and finding it beautiful. How well it fits with our new life path. Thanks for listening, everybody, to Wisdom Shared. For links and resources related to everything mentioned today, visit the show notes on carolblueice.com. If you'd like to support this podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing you can do is subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen. That way, you can receive wisdom every month. Sharing the show with friends or with social media is always appreciated. A final piece of wisdom in Beril's words from I Am Free Now. No matter how difficult, tiring, and dark the process may be for the moment, it brings light with it over time.